Morning everyone, and welcome to the Licensing and Safety Committee meeting. We'll start by doing a round of introductions. If members of the committee can identify themselves. I'll start with Councillor Watson. I'll start with myself, actually. Chair of the committee, Councillor Amanda Pinnock. Councillor Watson.
Councillor Mohan Sokal, Greenhead Ward.
So can I remind everyone to use their microphones? Thank you.
I've done.
Councillor Crook.
Councillor Moses Crook, Home Valley South Ward.
Andrew Marchington, one of the councillors for the Goka Ward.
Paola Davis, Almondbury Ward.
Thank you. And can I ask everyone else to identify themselves? I'll start from my right.
Fiona Goldsmith, Group Leader for Licensing.
Martin Wood, Head of Public Protection.
Councillor Sokal.
Yeah, Chair, Councillor Carol Pattison, she might be coming late. She attending a funeral of one of the Labour Party member. So as soon as she finishes, she will be here. I think Councillor Adam Jimman, he's coming late. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Jenny Bryce Chan, Governance Officer.
I'm David Stickley. I'm one of the solicitors that works for Kirklees. I'm here to give any legal advice that the committee may require.
Councillor Zaman. Could you identify yourself?
Councillor Zaman.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies? Do we have any substitutes today? I don't think we do. No, okay. So we'll move over to my left. If you can identify yourselves, please.
My name is Suhail Rashid from Kirklees, Hackney College. I'm a trade rep.
Mohammed Naimbat from Hackney College Trade Rep.
Thank you. We'll go straight into the agenda items. So minutes of the previous meeting that was held on the 6th of July. Could we approve that those are correct record? By show of hands, please. Councillor Watson?
Yes. There's just a couple of points that I'd like to make arising from that. One's a typo, which I can show to the officers afterwards. But the other is at page 7. The minutes record that work will continue with information governance colleagues and further information will be presented at this meeting. But I can't see that is in the agenda for this meeting, where that information is going to be provided. And secondly, if we look at page 14, question 10, the outcome is that it says that all committee members voted for option 1, but doesn't, in all the others, it details what options 1 and 2 are. That doesn't record what option 1 was. Now, I think that ties in with the point on page 18, where we look at question 10. Do you agree that the council should have a specific policy in relation to stretch limousines? And I think rather than saying it was option 1 or option 2, I think it was just a yes or no answer. So it looks to me that that point at 14 should record, rather than all committee members voted for option 1, it should say that all committee members voted that there should be a policy for stretch limousines.
Okay. Is that noted?
Yeah.
Thank you. In respect of page 8, page 7, sorry, where this particular issue was due to come back to committee. Do we have a reason why it's not as part of the agenda? Some clarity, please.
Yes, apologies, members. We are still working with information governance at the moment.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to interests. Any interest to declare at this stage? Raise your hand if you do, please. Okay. Admissions of the public. This meeting's webcast There are no matters in private for us to consider. Deputations and petitions. We have members of the public here. We have one member of the public here, Sahil Rashid, is that correct? Who will be speaking on a number of agenda items as we're going forward. So we'll hear some more from Mr. Rashid. Public question time, any questions?
None received, Chair.
Lovely. So we'll go straight into the first agenda item, which is item 7. The purpose of this report is for members to consider and resolve a new fare card for the Hackney carriage vehicles, and I'll ask Fiona to outline, please, the report.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to apologise because I think the report is slightly difficult to follow. It was quite difficult to write at the time, so I'm going to try and work through it to explain everything as clearly as I possibly can. So, in February 2022, we had a request from our Hackney Carriage Association members for us to consider a fare increase. The request was submitted for all of the tariffs that were existing to have a £1 increase on the start price, and that instead of and that tariff 2 and tariff 4 were to commence at 8 p.m. instead of 10 p.m. We went through the legal consultation process on this, and during that time we received multiple representations and objections to the proposed increase. So following this, we have a statutory timescale that we have to meet in order to make a decision on these, and a temporary measure was put in place through the delegated authority of the Strategic Director to agree the proposal as a temporary interim while we go out and do a little bit more engagement with the whole of the Hackney carriage trade to be able to come to a consensus to their views and which tariff they actually would like us to look at. After we'd consulted, we did receive like 18 responses, all of which had differing proposals, I'd say. So we ended up with quite a number of proposals. I purposefully didn't put all of the proposals into the report because I didn't actually want to confuse members. However, I think it's important that you see them today. So if I could just share my screen, that was my little hint, and I can show you what the proposals that all the trade came back with in the first instance. So we ended up with altogether 8 different proposals that were submitted by the trade. So following that, I engaged with them and we did a survey with all 8 of the proposals and asked for them to pick which of the proposals were preferable to the trade. Following the engagement process, we received 57 further responses to that. We ended up with 17 responses for proposal 1, which was the temporary measure that was already in place. And then we had 33 responses in favour of proposal 2. Proposals 3, 4, 5, 7 and 8 didn't have any responses, and proposal 6 received 1. And then we received one respondent who ticked both proposal 2 and 4, and one respondent that ticked all of the proposals. So this was an additional engagement process that we chose to go through in order to try to get more of a consensus from the trade as to what proposal out of all of those that have been submitted they actually wanted us to advertise formally again. So following this, proposal 2, which you can see within your report, which is on page 26, and if you look at 25 and 26, you can see the comparison between the proposal that is currently the temporary in place proposal and the proposal that they voted for within the survey. I just want to add, currently we have 224 Hackney carriage vehicle licences, within Kirklees. That's the cap of the number that the members put on. So that's how many vehicles, hackney carriage vehicles, we have within Kirklees. And even within the additional engagement process that we carried out, we only received 57 responses. So 57 of those possible 224 responded. The members today are asked to consider the proposed fare increase, taking into considerations that you can see that are shown at Appendix 4, and these are the responses to the second formal consultation that we carried out, that we have placed in there for members to consider. And I believe that a trade representative is here today and would like to speak today. Consideration must be given to all of the representations, and any changes to the fare must come into effect. So we must reach a decision 2 months from the date of the end of the consultation, and that will take us to the 18th of October. So a decision does need to be made today by members as to what fare increase, if any, they will be giving. So members have been asked to consider 3 options today. The first option is to increase the fare based on the proposal consulted upon, which we have named Proposal 2. Amend the proposed fare card following consideration of the representations that have been submitted. So members can decide to amend any of the proposals if they do so are minded to. Alternatively, members that can keep the fare as they are set at present, which was the temporary measure that can be seen at page 25 of your reports, following the initial request that came in from the trade representatives. So it's a matter for you, Chair, and I will take questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, I just want some clarity because I want everyone to sort of understand what we're asking them to do. And thank you, Fiona, for trying to, put together what is quite a complicated situation to explain. So could you just clarify, please, the difference between the current situation, so the current tariff, and what Proposal 2 is?
Of course.
So we're very clear.
Of course. So currently, you will see, if you go to page 25, Tariff 1 has a start price of £3.50, and then at 120 yards, every 120 yards, it goes up by 10 pence. And Tariff 2, starting price at £4, and after every 98 yards, it goes up by 10 pence. Tariff 3 is £4 starting, and after every 100 yards is a 10 pence increase. And Tariff 4 is £4.50 starting, and after 86 yards, it is a further 10 pence increase. So every 120, 98, 100 yards that the vehicle is travelling, it goes up by 10 pence. The proposal that was consulted upon following the engagement process is that Tariff 1 has a start price of £3.50, so that stays the same, but the yardage is decreased, so it goes to 10p per every 105 yards. And Tariff 2 is £4 starting price with an 80 pence increase, a 10 pence increase at every 80 yards. And then Tariff 3 is £5.50 starting price with a 10p increase every 70 yards. And Tariff 4 is a £6 starting price and has 10p increase every 60 yards. So you will see Tariff 3 and Tariff 4 both have another £1.50 increase on the starting price. Both proposals agree that the times remain as the temporary measure is, so that was reducing it down to 8 p.m. from 10 p.m. So that's hopefully that has explained it.
Further point of clarity as well. The price has already increased. So the Strategic Director for Environment and Climate Change has increased the price by £1, and that's a temporary increase already. So just to make that distinction,
Yes.
that it's already been increased by £1.
It has. It's already been increased by £1 and the time's already been reduced from 10 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the temporary the temporary measure that's in place.
Another question. So there are four responses. 3 of them are objections and 1 in support. Can you just clarify what those are? Because the second thing you're asking us to consider is whether to take account of what the objections or the support information is.
Yes, of course. Of course, Chair. So the first, you'll see objection 1. Objection 1 has fed back that they feel that at the moment the temporary increase that they've got, the customers are relatively happy with it, and the drivers are also receiving a little bit more for their journeys. And they want members to consider that they feel that they're in a very delicate situation at the moment. And yes, ideally everybody wants the price increase. However, they want members to consider the fact that they have to balance keeping the customers happy and keeping and them themselves being able to earn a decent wage. And the first objection is a driver of a 6-seater, and they say they would not be comfortable charging the new proposed rates for tariff 3 and 4. So that's the additional £1.50 starting rate. They do not mention anything in relation to the reduction in the yardage in the objection, though. Objection 2 is somebody who would like to put the objection in because they feel that the fare proposal will affect the trade, as the cost of living affects everybody, including their customers. And they feel they may lose customers that if the increase is put in place, and they can't afford to lose the customers. Similarly, objection 3 references cost of living, that everybody is getting hit with it to some extent, and people, families are being squeezed, and they feel it would be unfair to add any additional burden to their customers. They feel the interim fare structure is fair and it's worked well, and that as fuel prices have started to now drop, they feel that keeping the interim fare should be kept. And then, in addition, we did receive 1 support, and that was the person who presented the proposal, and they've wanted to vote for the increased proposal, not the current prices. And they agree with the tariff increases, yards reduced with the adjusted timings.
And finally, option 3. What is option 3?
So option 3, so we've got 3 options. The first one is to increase it to the proposal. The second one is to make any amendments that members may see fit. And the third one is to keep it at the temporary, so in effect make the temporary provision permanent until we look to review fees going forward. One thing that we have agreed with the trade representatives in a meeting earlier on in the year is that we will set it as an agenda item once a year, and we will pose the question to them, do you wish to look at the Hackney carriage fares this year? That's something that's never been done before, and I believe the last time fares were increased were around 2015, I think it was. So there has been a length of time between it. So that's another thing we're putting in place to try to assist the trade in annually to see if there's any changes that they want to make.
Move to questions. Councillor Sokal.
Clarification, Chair. I think the consultation process is very confusing, actually, I'm thinking, yeah. On page 24, yeah, 2.8, where is a which first consultation you receive response of 18 responses, yeah? 7 and to increase, 10 again. Well, one petition is signed by 92 taxi holders. You're not taking into account that 92, but you, on the second one, it's only 57. So if we take into account 92 taxi holders who signed the petition, so it go over 100. Yeah? So do you think it's fair? Why you just ignoring those 92 who are against the fair increase?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. We didn't ignore, that's why we went back to engage with
you
them.
You did not mention in your report, but
My apologies. So after the initial consultation, the reason why we went out to do further engagement was because we did receive the petition. I believe, you know, the petition did have multiple signatures on, and we decided that's why the temporary measure was put in place, in order to, because there were so many differing proposals put forward, it was best that we engage further with the trade to ensure that we actually did get a feedback from every person. Unfortunately, we can't force people to respond to engagement and consultation processes, but you know, we do our best to engage with the trade to ensure that we do hear everybody's voice.
But you, Chair, sorry, you got 112 something there. 110 responses on the first consultation. You should have accepted that one. Yeah. You ignore, you count only one member, one petition, but they signed by 92. It's not that there was no need for second consultation.
I think the point my colleague's making is it the £1 increase, the temporary £1 increase?
No, first one is they are against the fair increase at all, yeah.
Yeah, so what we did, so yes, we didn't ignore the 92, so we received objections to the £1 fare increase. So the decision could have been taken to keep it as it was, and they didn't get anything at the time. So in order to engage to get a consensus on the fare that the majority did want, it was decided by the strategic director to agree the temporary measure whilst we look at it. And this is why we've got the decision for members today to say the proposal 2 is what the favoured decision was after full consultation. And it is a matter for members to make the final decision on what fare the Hackney trade should get.
Can I say? Yeah, can I mean, we all accept the country going through very serious situation, rising cost of living, yeah? Plus, these taxi drivers, yeah, who are driving day and night, yeah? Bus fares has been reduced, £2 everywhere. So the bus fare affected the taxi trade as well. So there was no need to even, under your delegate authority to increase the £1 off. You did not take into account the situation, how the family are struggling. Yeah, if the fare even £1 is gone up, still family can't afford to pay the rent because the £2 is cheaper on the buses rather than get a taxi. But what about the people who are 4 or 5 members, yeah, in the family, yeah, to invite taxi will cost. Yeah. So I think, Chair, I think the decision has been taken even by those officers, strategic director. I don't think it's right. We should go back to the original one, what the fare was. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
In my views, anyway.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Sokal. Councillor Homewood?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, just silly question that I just didn't understand, and maybe it's in here, I just didn't get it. On the tariffs, is the difference tariffs, is that to do with the size of the vehicle, or what is it to do with, just so I understand?
Yeah, Yes, it is. So so if I take you to Appendix 1, and that gives you an example. So you'll see there's Tariff 1 and Tariff 2, and then there's a second fare card, which is Tariff 1, Tariff 2, Tariff 3, Tariff 4. So Tariff 1 and 2 are for vehicles that take 4 passengers or less. Well, if you've got 4 passengers or less. The second one is for those that can take up to 8 passengers within them.
Okay, thank you. My second point was just to say that I do find it's quite a complicated one, and I'm a bit struggling with how to make the decision on it, because I understand why we have to consult on this and get the views of the drivers and understand what their perspective is. But there's nothing in the report that kind of explains to me what the actual increase in cost has been for drivers around the inflation and fuel costs over this period from 2015, which presumably would give us an understanding of what the increase should be in terms of fair value for both the driver and the user. So at the moment we're being asked to make a decision, say some drivers think this is the right approach, but others concerned that it'll see a drop off in use. How can we make that decision unless we understand what the actual going rate effectively should be for this type of service? And I'm a bit, because some of the differences look quite significant in terms of the proposals, and also things like, number of yards and stuff. I mean, I don't know what that extrapolates to in terms of a 2-mile journey home. Do you know what I mean? I think, for me, I'm struggling with the information that's there to understand how to make that decision.
Yes, appreciated. It isn't. I don't think it's very clear cut, and I think it's the information that you've asked for would be very difficult for us to achieve. When we deal with fare increases, the request legally has to come from the trade. So they put the request in to us, and then legally we have to consult on it. We wouldn't normally go down the route of looking at what the cost of actually delivering the service is. If that's something members would like us to look at going forward, I'm sure that we can try and quantify that for you in another time when we do a further fare increase. But I suppose it's quite difficult because, as you know, the cost of petrol's been going up and down and up and down. So on any one day, it may well be slightly different anyway.
Councillor Marchington.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple of points really. I'll just follow on from what Councillor Homewood said. It would be really useful. Yeah, cause, I mean, if you look at objection, the first written objection on page 33, you've got a demonstration of what tariff 3 or 4 would do for a larger vehicle, and I think that's the sort of thing I think I would appreciate. If we're setting tariffs going forward, it's some relationship to the costs of fuel, maintenance, repair, so I'm looking at that. And it would be really useful to work with the trade about that. That's what we consult about, what are your costs and stuff, what are your cost pressures, rather than it being, these are the fares, how do you think that's going to work out? And I think, as Councillor Homewood said, I would some sort of, if we had an example fare, from, say, Huddersfield Station to Goka or Denbigh or something, whatever, just a realistic journey at different times, and it will give us a clear implication of what increase in tariffs would be. And then I think that's what we could consult the trade on as well, so we see what the impact is. That balance between members of the Hackney carriage trade actually making a reasonable living out of it, which we want to do. You've got to balance that up against the cost to their customers. So I think I would appreciate that in terms of making the decision. Yeah, I can see lots of numbers. It's quite complicated, and even being really competent, reasonably good with numbers, I would struggle to at the moment. I need to get my map out and stuff. I think the other thing, just picking up on Councillor Sokol's point, is on page 24 about the petition holes in 92. It would have been interesting to see which. It says they object to the fare increase, but they proposed an alternative. What was that alternative proposal? Was it a different increase? Presumably that's one of the ones we consulted on, or was it not to rise it? So that's not clear about what those 92. And that's a third of, if they were all Hackney carriage licence holders, you've got about 30% sample there. So don't understand what their proposal was.
I mean, some interesting points have been raised today, and I'm just mindful of timescales, because you do say in the report that there's limited time to implement whatever the decision the panel make today. Can you just elaborate on that, please?
Yes, so within the legislation, there is a specific time frame that we have to consult. So we do the consultation, and that's carried out. And then from the date the consultation ends, we have 2 months to have a formal decision on the actual tariff that's going to be used. So today really is the last sort of chance that members will have to make a decision. It doesn't mean that members can't say we'll adopt that and review it in a certain period of time. And the council's comments have been taken on board. I think lessons learned as we go forward, we can look to give some example tax. So if somebody's doing a generic journey from, we'll say, the train station to the university, for example, we could work out what the cost implications will be and should present that at a later date when we're doing this fare increase at another time.
So just to clarify then, it's fair to say there's a fourth option available to members. So that's something that can be looked at going forward.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be a fourth option because the options today are, there's got to be a decision, but it can either be to adopt what they've already got, change what they've applied for, or go for the proposal 2 that has been done. Members can ask that we can look at, when we do it, that we consider that next time we get the fare increase. As I've said, annually now we are going to be asking the trade if they want us to do it. So when we do that, we can look to put that in going forward, but it's not possible today, I'm afraid.
Thanks for the clarity. Okay.
Thank you very much. In relation to the point about the petition, I'm actually comfortable on that, because looking at the text of the letter that was sent out by the officers, I think that does actually address that, and they were effectively saying, we've had a lot of ideas, we're throwing them back out to you. Just a couple of points, really, for me to understand and clarify, which I might address to the officers. Hackney fares we're talking about here, is that the same as private hire fares?
No, private hire fares, so every private hire operator sets their own fares. It's not for the licensing authority to do. However, the legislation dictates that the licensing authority set the fares for the Hackney carriage trade.
Thank you, that's good. That confirms my understanding, because ideologically I'm actually quite uncomfortable sitting here dictating prices that people running independent businesses in Kirklees can sell their product at. But I understand the historical reasons for that. Which takes me to look at the page 30, where we have the sort of chart that goes in the car, and it says that a fare for the following rates shall apply unless at the start of hiring a fare for the journey is agreed between the hirer and the driver. So on that basis, is my understanding correct that any Hackney driver can actually sit down at the start of that journey and negotiate a completely different fare with the customer? And if they do, it then says that the taximeter will be used on all journeys within Kirklees. So I'm just a little unclear there whether you can actually bin these tables anyway and just agree a price. And if you do that, do you have to still have the taximeter running?
Okay, thank you for the question. It is a good question. It is something that has recently been discussed at our associations, actually. These Hackney fare cards, I think, have been around for quite a number of years. I think the wording on them isn't fantastic. So the legislation dictates that they can arrange a fare. However, it cannot be more than that is shown on the meter. So the fare has to be set and the meter has to be switched on, but it can't be more than that on the meter.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Thanks, Chair. We've discussed a lot the impact on the cost of journeys that voting for this fare increase would be. Do we have any data from Trade Association on the correlation between earnings for Hackney carriage drivers and the increases in fuel costs and cost of living, so that we could maybe monitor changes in fare cards that we voted on in terms of their impact on earnings? And also, just a slightly side point, why are the distances measured in yards?
With regard to your first point, we don't have the information about how much the trade earn. I'm not sure it would be appropriate for us to have that. Obviously, they are generally self-employed. They own their own vehicles. They work. They may have other people working. Some of the Hackney vehicles can be on the road 24 hours a day with different people working for them. Whether it's appropriate for the authority to have people's information about how much people are earning, I'm not sure. We only license them, we don't employ them, we're not their employers. In relation to your second point, noted, yards has been historic, that's the way it's always been. The people that calibrate so for every time that the meters get changed, they have to be taken to calibration, and that's what the calibration machines work in. I'm not sure whether it can be changed. Possibly it can, but historically it's always been done in yards.
Just a quick follow-up. Sorry, I wasn't suggesting that we monitor the individual earnings of people, just that as an industry, if we could see that there was a collapse in earnings and that was risking the industry, then we could perhaps try and reflect that in the way that we voted in terms of fare increases. So I assume that data is published because self-employed people do a tax return or whatever, and the industry will have data. It's just a thought.
Any more questions? No. So I'm going to ask Mr. Rashid then. He's here. Well, could you identify yourself and say if you're representing yourself or you're representing the trade, please?
Thank you for that. Good morning. My name is Suhair Rashid. I am a taxi driver, Hackney College. I also represent, I'm a trade rep for the Kirklees Hackney College Association for Huddersfield. I've got a statement written now, which I'm going to actually read, and then I'll follow up on some points. We are in the midst of a cost of living crisis, and everyone is getting squeezed to the point where they won't be able to afford many things. In that scenario, cutbacks are made, and one thing that changes is getting into a taxi. This is because there are alternatives like buses, private hire, or they can walk if the weather's good. Regardless, if the paying customer can't afford to pay the fare, this will result in a loss of trade for us, resulting in many losing their jobs. The current fare structure has been working well over the last few months, which is fair and reasonable for the trade and customers. We strongly believe that the proposed fare increase cannot be justified at present and should not be implemented. We have to be careful not to price ourselves out of the competitive market. Since getting to this point today, it has taken us 8 months, whereas private hire have had an increase and a decrease in that time frame. People are already struggling in society, and by putting fares too high, you will encourage people to think twice before using taxis and push them away. Fuel prices are coming down. We've seen that every day. I think at the start of February, when the prices were going high, and the reason you've got so many proposals out there is the trade went into panic overdrive. The price of fuel from 130 kept on inching further and further, where there was an assumption that it would hit £2.50 a litre, which is why throughout the whole trade, every person had a different idea of what the fare structure should be, but they were not thinking of the implications of what that would do to our trade. So I would strongly urge you to make no changes to the fare structure today, as the current fares are working well. We've had them for about 3-4 months, I think it is, and it's worked well for both the drivers, it's worked well for the paying customers. There is a balance, and we've actually achieved that with the simple £1 increase. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rashid. I have a few questions, and I'm sure the committee members do. So I just wanted to clarify. So you said the current pay structure over the last 2 months has been working well. Is that the increase by £1, which has been set by the strategic director?
Yes, the increase by the £1. That's been working well, yeah.
And your representations today are you're quite happy for it to stay the way it is?
Yes, please.
And what you're specifically saying is that you object to proposal 2,
Yes.
which has been outlined in the application.
Yes.
And when the letter with the various proposals went out, that was at a time when fuel was high and the trade were panicking at the time, hence the reason for the deviation from what was said before. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Also, let me just add into that. The trade, the trade, they have this view that because we are trade reps, if I ask for an increase, it means the 200 people behind me are asking for an increase. They don't understand the logic that they have to vote, which we had a voting system in place. They were told to vote, but they're under the impression because we're representing them, our vote counts for them. And it's hard to put that information out there, which is why there was a small amount of votes that were cast, which even I was shocked when Fiona came back with, this is all I've got. So I'll let you know that.
Last question. Who do you represent? How many people do you represent? Who are you speaking on behalf of? Just for that clarity, it's really important.
That's fine. So I represent the Hackney Carriage taxi drivers in Huddersfield. That would be how much?
170, 80.
About 170, 80 drivers. But that also covers the Dewsbury side as well. So it's Huddersfield side and the Dewsbury side. But Hackney Carriage only.
Sorry, one more. How do you engage with them? How do you get the information that you need to be able to speak on their behalf?
Right, so we're trade reps here in Huddersfield. The gentlemen behind me are trade reps in Dewsbury. We have a WhatsApp group, word of mouth. We also do newsletters, if you want to call them newsletters. But generally, we try to get the information out. So we have, like I said, WhatsApp groups, word of mouth, meetings. We do hold meetings. If there's something urgent, like we had with the fare increase, there were meetings taking place at halls and arranged to get this information out and see what they want and how they want to do it.
Thank you. Questions from the committee, please? Councillor Watson.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful, and thank you for taking the time to come here. If I would summarise what I'm hearing here, it's that, and perhaps the gentleman from Dewsbury might like to chip in at some point and confirm whether the view of Dewsbury is the same. But if what I'm hearing is that the change that was made earlier in the year pushes it far enough, and you wouldn't want to see prices go any further because of, for example, the fact that the private hire drivers can set their own rates. As Councillor Sokal says, the Mayor is driving down the price of buses, which is presumably eating into your business. And really, the increase that we've had so far is really pushing it as far as you would want to see it go. Have I understood your views correct and the views of your members? And for the chaps from Dewsbury, would they accord with that?
Yes, you've got it spot on. We have to understand, right, that private hire and Hackney Carriage we're effectively doing the same job. Obviously, under law, it's defined differently, but we are effectively doing the same job. It would be silly on our behalf to put our prices so high where we lose customers and they'll go to private hire. So we have to have a balance between the private hire fare and then obviously our fare. And like I said, they can set their fares to whatever they like. We obviously can't do that. Just to get here, it's taken us 8 months. I mean, if we were trying to change our fares every couple of months, you can imagine how long it'll take. Yes, that pound increase has made a big difference to the fare, to the trade. Regarding buses, like Mr. Sokal said as well, yes, there's a £2 set rate, but then you have to also balance it out with, if there's a family of 4 of you going to, say, across from Moor, it's cheaper to get a taxi because, you know, you're not getting charged each, only one person's paying and it's on the meter. So it can balance it out, and then there's a choice. You can decide you want to go in a taxi or you want to go on a bus. That's your choice.
Councillor Marchant. Sorry, I thought you'd finished. Councillor Marchington.
Yeah, thank you for your representation. It's really useful. And as Fiona said, it seems to be about 7 years since there was last a request. And there's a learning, you know, we're all learning about how we do this. and things might be a little less stable going ahead in the the years than they have been for the last 7 years in terms of pricing of fuel and costs of maintenance. And so the point about us being able to engage with yourselves and the Hackney carriage trade about costs if we're going ahead looking to the future, do you think you'd be willing to work with licensing to get a better understanding what your costs are, what the impacts of increases would be on your trade and your customers? So rather than just consulting on a, this is the new prices, what do you think about it? Actually say, well, these are the costs we're experiencing and this might be how we want to set the fares going in the future. And I suppose, again, if fuel prices drop significantly, it might be, we think we want to, there might need to be a reduction in that.
Yeah, I mean, we could do, I don't know. We've never done it, you see, historically, so I can't obviously say if it's a good idea or not. It'll have to be worked out. But, let me just put it out there. The costs that are associated with Hackney carriage would be wear and tear, maintenance of the vehicle, fuel costs, insurance, getting the vehicle cleaned. A lot of people go to the car washers or they'll get them professionally detailed, and that does cost quite an amount. And then you have situations where you've got a passenger in their vehicle who's probably vomited in your vehicle, and it might be, 1 o'clock in the morning. What are you going to do then? It's a busy Saturday night. You can't work. So I don't know how the costs would be worked out on that side. But I think if it came to that, we would work with the licensing to come up with the ideal solution.
Any more questions? Right. Councillor Watson.
Just listening to what you're saying. Why do you operate as a Hackney carriage rather than a private hire? Whereas a private hire, you can set your own rates and everything like that. What's the advantage of being a Hackney driver?
I'm my own boss. I don't have to answer to a boss. Like I said, like I'm sat here today, I'm doing it out of my own goodwill. I don't have to take time off. Once I finish this meeting, I don't have to go back to work if I don't want to go to work. And that works for me. That's why I do it.
No, sorry, it wasn't much about you personally. Why would a person choose to operate as a Hackney driver rather than a private hire vehicle?
I think this is my own opinion. Everybody might have their own opinion. With the Hackney, like I said, we're our own bosses. We can set our own times. I can go and park in town wherever I like. Plus, I have that added advantage. If I've dropped off at the hospital, I can actually pick up a fare from there and come back. Or if I'm driving back down into town, I don't really have to come back to the rank. Whereas as a private hire driver, I'd have to have a booking. I can't just pick anyone from the street. So obviously that works for a lot of people, that does. And this is why I think people choose to be a Hackney driver.
Fiona?
Would I be able to add something as well? I think historically Hackney vehicles, they're seen as like the gateway to the towns and the cities that they're in. So you'll notice every time you get off a train or a bus, 9 times out of 10, you'll find there'll be a Hackney rank just outside, and they're ranked up and they can take, so they're there as a gateway for people that are visiting the borough as well. So it could be that somebody, I'm coming to visit Kirklees, I've never been here before, but, and you get off and you can step straight into a vehicle. You don't have to go, what private hire operators around here, and then wait half an hour. You've got them there, and they know where they're going. They've got the knowledge of the area, and it's a gateway for the borough. It's just, it's good. I think it's good for tourism and things like that as well.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, members, we have a decision to make. So there's 3 options that have been presented to us. One of them is to increase the fare based on proposed consultation. So the gentleman next to Mr. Rashid, who didn't want to speak, would like to speak. Oh, the gentleman behind would like to speak.
Yeah.
Could you first of all identify yourself?
Yeah.
And are you speaking on, you know,
Yeah.
on your own? Are you speaking on your own behalf or on behalf of
No,
a particular
I
trade?
represent quite a few of the drivers from Dewsbury. I just basically want to echo what Mr. Sohail said. At this present moment in time, I think to increase or have another increase would be bad for our business. So basically, you know, I think we do want an increase, but not at this present moment. I think we're quite happy with the pound increase. And I think I speak for about 40 to 50 Dewsbury drivers. I'm in contact with the Huddersfield drivers. I think I'm in the same boat as them. And basically that's, you know, just to clarify that we are in as a group. And I don't think we should have an increase anymore.
Thank you. I don't think we have any questions. No. So we'll move to the proposals then. So the first proposal that's been put forward is that the fares increased based on proposal 2, which we've been through. The second option available is to amend the proposed fare following consideration of the representation submitted. So what we've heard today, based on what we've been told, based on the information that's in the report from the 3 objectors and the 1 person in support. Or the third option, to keep the fare as it's set at present, following the initial request from the trade. So can we have a show of hands then, please? Councillor Marchington?
Do you want to debate on that?
Sorry?
Or do you just want to go straight to the proposals, or...?
I think we need to go straight to the proposals. Well, you can propose 3.
All right, fine.
But that's what trade are asking, you know, they say because they're struggling anyway. I think keep the fare as they are set at the present, following the initial request from the trade.
Yeah.
Is that what you want? Yeah? I think they made it very clear. We have to listen to this taxi trade. They represent 178, I think. But they mean the strategic director had raised the £1, is it? So you are happy with that? No more. Yeah. So that's option 3 to cover that. Fiona?
So you're making that proposal, Councillor Sokal?
No, I just want to know, is that option 3, it covers this one, but the trade is asking?
Option 3 covers what the trade have requested, yes, to keep it at the current temporary proposal, make the temporary proposal permanent.
Can I ask another question to Fiona? So the fare will be a review after another 3 years or no?
No, what we've agreed with the trade at the it was the trade meeting, wasn't it? Just after, it was February, March time. We agreed with the trade that what we would do is we will have it as a standard agenda item once a year, and we will ask the trade, do you wish to look at the fares this year? And if they do, we will work with them to hopefully try and get a fare every year, if that's what they want to do, that they are happy with.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously, you know, we would look to maybe have a steer from members as to how we go about that.
Yeah, I understand. So I propose option 3.
Thank you, Councillor Sokal. Councillor Marchington?
Yeah, that's what I was going to... I mean, having listened to what everybody said, the questions from members of the committee, from Fiona and the members of the licensed trade, I would be minded to support option 3. If we want to propose, I mean, if Councillor Sokal's proposed that, I'm happy to second that. I think we do need to keep an eye on it. I think annually at the moment is probably appropriate, and looking at actually the cost implications and make sure that we're setting, as Councillor Homewood said, understand what the implications are of that on the livings of the trade and stuff like that. I want to do that. I think we also ought to be mindful if things change significantly within the next 12 months, is it okay for the licensed trade to come back and say, request another review?
Yes, of course they can.
Yeah, so 12 months is, right, 12 months is a minimum, but just to realise if things change significantly, you can come back whatever that might be. So I'm happy to second option 3 as a proposal.
Lovely. So we'll have a show of hands then for option 3. I think we're unanimous, aren't we? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8. And this report, the purpose of the report is to advise members of a minor change to the existing driver training policy and the proposed introduction of a fast-track application process for new drivers. Fiona?
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is it's a bit of an update report on the driver training policy with a request for members to make a decision as well. So as you may or may not be aware, the driver training policy was brought in August 2019, and you can find the driver training policy at Appendix 1 to your pack, and that is that was brought in August 2019. Due to the pandemic, unfortunately, some of it got put on hold because we weren't accepting new driver applications throughout the pandemic. One of the requirements on the policy that was brought in was that all new drivers' applications should pass an ESOL Entry 3 English test in speaking, reading and listening. We found that when we reopened following the pandemic and started to introduce new drivers again, we also introduced the English test aspect of it. And we found that applicants, there was a bit of a bottleneck of applicants coming through, and it was becoming evident that a number of the people that wanted to become drivers had qualifications to the same level or above. And a decision was taken by the Strategic Director for Environment and Climate Change to relax the policy while we were bringing in the new requirements, and to avoid the bottlenecks of people waiting months and months and months to actually get through the system. It's working quite well. We are looking at, we are getting multiple requests weekly from new drivers who have got certification to the level or above, and those that don't, we still have the path for them to go down if they want to continue to be a driver, and it means that they can get through the path a bit quicker. So initially what we were asking members to do is to formally agree to amend the policy to say that we will continue to accept certification that somebody has the qualifications to the level or above. So, for example, I'll give you an example. So, Entry 3, I want to just go through what the qualification levels are. Entry 3 is not a high level. It's not a massively high level of standard English. It says it starts at, within your qualification things, it starts at Entry 1, Entry 2, Entry 3. Then you hit your level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 being, I think it's a BA, a master, a degree in some subject. So it goes down. So we're basically asking somebody to have a standard of English that meets the Entry 3 level, and anybody that has that standard or above can move through to the next stage. So members are asked to decide whether they would like us to keep that from being temporary to a permanent measure. In addition, we are looking to employ a new training officer who will take on some of the training. We want to be flexible. We want to get people through the process as quickly as possible. So we want to provide all the training in-house and be able to flexibly do it for new drivers wanting to come through. In addition, we're also wanting to offer the option to new drivers that if they can have in effect a one-on-one with a trainer. So instead of booking onto a session with 12 people and going through, so if they had to go and do an English assessment and then they have to go and book onto the theory assessment and the knowledge test and then the actual driving test. But what we're wanting to offer is a way for them to say, well, I'll pay for a one-on-one session with the trainer and get through the process quickly. so that we can then get the application through and get them working as quickly as possible. Obviously, there are certain cost implications to it, so they will have to pay more because it's about the time of the administration of it all. But it's an option there for people that do want to get through the process quickly. Our aim, in effect, is to provide an efficient and flexible approach to it. So we don't want to just say we're only going to have one training session once a month and we're only going to allow 12 people to go on it. What we want to be able to do is say, actually, we can offer sessions throughout the borough, from North Kirklees to South Kirklees. We will go to different areas. We will have multiple sessions on a month and we will get people through the process. So the next steps and timelines are if members agree to the proposed amendments to the driver training to make it permanent, all applicants, not all applicants have to go for the English test, and we will continue to accept the certificates, and the fast track process will be introduced from the 1st of April 23. And because we are just in the process of looking to recruit an in-house trainer that will sit within the licensing team that is qualified in offering the training sessions. So we are recommending that members note the report and hopefully agree to make permanent the temporary change in policy, that if an applicant produces evidence that they've undertaken the qualification that's entry level or above in the form of a certificate, and that the qualification's been achieved in the UK, that they're permitted to pass to the next stage of the application process without having to undertake the English assessment, and agree to the proposed fast-track application process and ask officers to bring a report back to the Licensing Safety Committee with further details about timescales and fees. It's a matter for you, Chair.
Any questions? Councillor Sokal?
Yes, Chair. Can I ask Fiona? The new applicant, they have to produce evidence of something of entry 3 level, yeah? Mm-hmm. So how long has it been running as a temporary, already in
It is, yeah. So it was beginning of this year. So we opened back up to new drivers around October last year. Yeah. And we had an English test provider, and they did the test for both our applicants and the applicants at Calderdale Council as well. It became quite evident within a couple of months. Initially, there was a very slow uptake, and then it hit January, and we suddenly started seeing an increase in the numbers, and they were struggling to be able to facilitate all the people that were wanting to come and become drivers with us. And we were getting a lot of queries from the applicants saying, but I've got this qualification and I've got that qualification. So a decision was taken by the strategic director, I think it was it for February, March time this year, to say that we would start accepting certification as opposed to them actually having to go and do the assessment. And we are finding it's making it a lot more of a straightforward process for the applicants.
Yeah, if the applicant produce entry 3 level, so after that there won't be any written test for them.
There will, yeah. So that's just the English test aspect of it. If they then still have to go and do the theory training, which is the 4 parts. So if you look at page 41 of your pack in Appendix 1, there are certain things that they have to do before they can become a driver. English test is the first stage. We chose to do it that way because if somebody can't pass that test, they're not going to be able to sit through the theory and the local knowledge test and pass it, and that would be costly for them. So we need to be, they would then move on. So they do a training day where they do the 4 aspects of the theory, which is regulatory framework, professional standards, safeguarding, and equalities and disability training. They do they sit through a training session at that, and then they have questions that they answer at the end. All the questions relate specifically to what they've been taught that day. It is multiple, you know, it is multiple choice. So if they've been listening and they understand, they should be able to answer the questions. And then they follow on from that and they do a local knowledge test, to which we're provided with a pack before they actually take it, so that they can revise before they come and sit the test.
Yeah, Chair, I'm not sure about that, but the new applicant, they perceive this new system. Do they welcome this one or no? Do they think it's a bit easy than ESO?
Yeah, so realistically, anybody, the introduction of this, the acceptance certificates makes it so much easier for the applicant. It makes it a quicker process if somebody has got that qualification. If they can't access the qualifications, we have now found a way that we can actually access the qualifications for them, because we're working with our team within the council that can do that. So, you know, it's all about us actually trying to aid them through the process and make it a streamlined and better service for the applicants, and it will save money for them as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the question I was going to ask. Is there a financial implication that would benefit the applicant?
Yeah, so if they're not having to take the English test, they're not having to pay for the English test.
Councillor Marchington?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Fiona. So I'm assuming, so we're saying that we're formalising this on the 1st of April next year.
So if members could formalise the temporary measure to be made permanent, i.e. we will accept certificates, we will continue as we are doing from now.
That's fine.
It's the fast track, so we just need to hone down how much it's going to cost, how much all the details about how quickly we can get somebody through the process, and we're going to have to do that at a later date. Yeah.
So it sounds to be a measure that's working well for everybody. So it's speeding things up and it's simplifying it. So that seems to be absolutely a sensible thing. So I'm happy we're doing that. So I would want that to continue. I think the other thing about training, if somebody does come and literacy is an issue for them, presumably the trainer is about this language specific to the trade, but actually if we can point them in the direction of other training that's available, because actually having, you know, speaking, listening, reading skills is just a good life skill as well. So if we could just, you know, use that as an opportunity to help somebody who's looking for work and employment in that direction as well. So it's not just about this specific. Yeah.
For those that do not meet the entry 3 standard, so they aren't at that level, they will be offered training to get them to that level, and there should be funding. There is funding that can help them, so they don't have to pay for it. If they then want to go on, because obviously it's done, we're actually bringing it back into Kirklees, so it will be done by our internal adult learning, and they will aid people through it. They hopefully will be funding to help pay for it if they don't meet the standard. And at the same time, while they're there, they can look to do other courses as well if that's what they want to do.
Any more questions? Mr. Rashid, anything you want to add?
No.
Okay.
Nothing to that. Thank you.
Any comments on what's been said? It'd be interesting to get your take on this.
I'm actually quite happy with that. I can't really say anything. I mean, I've always said that as a taxi driver, obviously the job is to get the passenger from A to B safely, but they do need to have a certain level of understanding so they can hold simple conversations with their customers. But I think it's been covered with the entry level, so no, I don't have no comments.
I'm grateful, thank you. Okay, so no more questions, no more comments. Let's move to what's been recommended, which is 1, the report is noted. 2nd, we agreed to make permanent the temporary changes to the policy. Are we in agreement with that? Show of hands. Fantastic. And the last one, we agree to the proposed fast-track application process, and officers will bring back further detail in the near future about that. Are we in agreement? Fantastic. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, item 9. So the purpose of the report is to seek approval from the committee to commence a consultation in relation to proposed changes to the Council's current suitability policy following a 3-year review. Fiona?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report today is obviously for us, at the meeting of the committee on the 6th of July, members will remember that we presented a report that outlined some concerns raised by the council in relation to the statement of fitness and suitability from the licensed trade. Members agreed and instructed officers to look at the concerns and to do a full review of the policy. We have worked on that over the last couple of months, and members will now see that Appendix 1 we have a proposed amendments to what is the existing policy, following consideration of everything that's previously been brought to our attention in relation to it. Historically, when the policy was brought into place, there was an integrated impact assessment completed. For ease, I wanted to add this to the report so that members could see that we had done it, and that is shown at Appendix 2. When we've, hopefully, if members agree to the consultation on the policy, we will ensure that the impact assessment is updated to reflect any changes that happen to the policy. So our next steps and timelines are for members to consider the proposal and take a decision as to whether they wish to instruct officers to carry out a consultation on the draft proposed changes, and for members to make a decision about the length of time they would like us to consult on it for. It's recommended that members instruct officers to commence what we would say is an adequate time would be a 3-month consultation period, and members' options are to instruct officers to do so and suggest, if they, or alternatively they can suggest any further amendments to the draft policy that they can see at Appendix 1, and then instruct officers to carry out a 3-month consultation. Or members could today agree not to implement any of the proposals or conduct a consultation and keep the policy as existing. So it's a matter for you, Chair.
Thank you. Just going through the Appendix 1, the draft fitness and suitability policy, and I can see that some of the amendments in red really elaborate on what's already there, give more of an explanation to things, and clarify really the position that the council want to take. I think it would be remiss of me not to sort of take everybody to table B, which has been the most contentious item for a little while now in respect of the trade, and I just want you really to clarify what the proposed changes have been put forward in relation to table B, minor traffic offences.
Yeah, I'll talk you through it. So previously, under the minor traffic offences, it said that at 7 points we would do an officer review on a person's licence, and it's likely that if somebody gets 7 or more points, they would either be refused or revoked. So we knew that there's been quite a lot of issue with that policy. So we have tried to expand on how we would come to a decision if somebody has got 7 or more points on their licence, and what actions we may take. So if there's anything that we would do rather than revocation, if there's warnings, training, things like that they can do. So you will see on page 57, we've created it's now got its own table as minor traffic offences. And a minor traffic offence in itself is a vehicle offence that doesn't include offences involving the loss of life, driving whilst under the influence of drink or drugs, driving whilst using handheld telephone or device, no insurance, or offences that have resulted in injury to a person or damage to property. So anything other than those is considered to be a minor traffic offence. So Number one, a licence will not normally be granted for new applicants where the minor motoring offences have resulted in 9 or more points. So I just want to remind members that generally speaking, offences usually for minor motoring offences would usually follow the path of 3 at a time. So you would potentially get 3 minor motoring offences and be asked to go on a speed awareness course. Then if you commit another offence, I think it's within 3 years, or yes, 3 years, and you do it again, you'd get 3 points on your licence. That's 2 offences committed. Then if you do it again, you get another 3 points, which would take you up to 6. And anybody that had done that previously, we wouldn't look at on the policy as it stands. Then you may get another minor motoring conviction. So although our policy, it does say 7 currently, 9 times out of 10, the person would have 9 points on their licence when it comes to us to look at. It's very rare that they'd get 7. So we've now stated that a licence will not normally be granted for new applicants where you've got 9 points on your licence. Where somebody has 7 or 8 points, in exceptional circumstances, we may grant it, subject to an applicant completing an additional driver safety assessment as deemed appropriate by the licensing authority. This is a new aspect, so it's something that we are going to have to look at and how we're going to do that, because we wouldn't normally do additional driver safety assessment. So a new applicant already currently has to do an advanced taxi driving test. So it would have to be something above and beyond that we would have to bring into place. For existing licensed drivers, where the minor motoring offences have resulted in 6 or less points, and they've just failed to notify us of the points. So as you may know, every licence holder, if they get points, are supposed to notify the licensing authority in accordance with the conditions attached to it. So yes, they've not done anything as in they've hit the threshold of points, but it's still a condition that they should tell us. So if we find out they haven't told us, we would issue a warning letter to say, make sure you tell us if you get points on your licence. Where as a result of a minor traffic or vehicle offences, the existing driver has 7 or 8 points, we would then potentially ask them to go on a driving training course, so another driven test to prove that they can meet the standard required. This will be by one of our approved testers, and it would have to be at the cost of the person, so they would have to pay for it. They will be given 3 opportunities to pass, and failure to pass on the 3rd time would be likely to result in a review of their licence, i.e. potential revocation of their licence, because if they can't pass the test after 3 times and they've got the points, are they fit and proper to then continue to hold that licence? And then section 4, where as a result of a minor traffic or vehicle offences, the existing driver obtains 9 or more penalty points and has also previously been required to attend and pass the test, have other compounding factors such as failure to declare. So as I said, declaration of any points is a requirement on the conditions of every single driver's licence, and failure to do so is a breach of the conditions of the licence. Has received a warning for minor motoring convictions. So if previously we've already issued a warning to them in writing, have any other convictions, or there's any other detrimental information recording against them. So, for example, we may find that somebody's got points and they've hit 9 points, and then when we look, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've had multiple complaints from customers saying that they've been aggressive, or their driving standards been bad, and we can, there's a culmination of factors as to why they would be considered not fit to hold a licence anymore. We would then consider whether or not we would revoke the licence unless there is an exceptional circumstance as to why the revocation should not take place. But again, with each one, every case that we look at, I don't think in my time in licensing I've ever come across the same case twice. Everything is judged on its own circumstances. In other cases where the driver obtains 9 or more points on their licence and none of the above applies, we will consider sending the driver on the practical driving test, and they will have to pay for that test, and failure to pass it would result in the revocation of their licence. So it will be you have to do it, and you have to do it first time, basically. We've also added in an extra section about MS90 offences. So MS90 offences are failure to give information as to the identity of the driver. We will class that as a minor traffic offence unless the balance of under the balance of probabilities there's evidence to show the failure to give information was an intentional act to evade points being endorsed on somebody's licence. Where such evidence exists, the offence will be classed as a major traffic offence. So in this, there are occasions where people are convicted for failure to give the information. I've had it previously where, I've had them say, well, I never received a letter and things like that. So we do take into consideration everything, and we do the investigation into the possibility of that being the case. In addition, we also look at the evidence of the offence. So on occasion when somebody has said they may not have done it, there has been CCTV evidence that they were the person driving at the time, for example. So again, just two very brief examples. There has never been a case where you'd see it, the same thing happen twice. So each case is always judged on its own merits, because it has to be, because nothing is ever the same twice. So when we're making the decision on the suitability of a driver who's committed an MS90 offence, we also take into account the underlying issues behind it. So we will DPA the police, and we will find out all the information that they have in relation to it. So hopefully, I'm hoping that answers your question, and I hope I've explained it thoroughly enough for you.
Thank you, Fiona. Any questions? Councillor Zaman?
Thanks for that. Just out of curiosity for context, are you able to share how many drivers currently have 79 penalty points, so we can understand what percentage of people that we're dealing with?
I don't have that information to hand with me today.
Supplementary question, Councillor Zaman?
Perhaps even if you don't have fixed figures, do you have an idea of what are we talking about? A handful? Are we talking about, or maybe a percentage?
I genuinely won't be able to give you a guesstimate as to how many do. We have to rely on the actual driver telling us that they've received the points. As I've said, it's a condition on their licence. It would mean that we'd have to physically go through everybody's driver record to check whether we've got a record of them notifying us. And if they do, ultimately, generally, we would find out upon renewal, because we do check DVLA licences. However, some drivers, well, the majority of drivers, and going forward it will be 3-year renewals, so unless they've told us, we don't automatically know, and to get that information isn't as straightforward as it would result in us having to look through multiple records, in fact possibility most of them.
But so surely when
Councillor. I mean, we can look at historics, so the numbers on average that we look at per year that come to us. Yeah. But I don't have that information to hand now. I'd have to go back and look through. Members will be aware that a few months ago we did bring a report with all the decisions, and that will contain the numbers. Although it was in private session, members did have access to all the decisions that have been taken since the introduction of the policy, and any that have had 7 or more points would be contained in that.
All right, okay. Are you able to provide a copy of that to me and the other members at a later stage, just so we can?
Yeah, we'll arrange for a copy of that. I can get specifics and send them round.
All right, thanks.
I don't think you were a committee member at the time, Councillor Zaman, so we'll make sure you get a copy of that report, it is quite detailed, isn't it?
It was, yes, yeah. I mean, we did it as a private session. It detailed every single decision that we've taken since August 2019.
Any questions from anyone? Councillor Sokal?
I'm not quite sure. This report amendment done on this table B, yeah? Has the amendment been done following our last meeting here? When members...
Yes, we've looked at it as members requested us to go away and do some work on the policy. We considered all of the representations that we've received prior to that meeting in relation to concerns raised by the trade, and we have looked through them all and we've put this proposal forward. Obviously, we've now got to ask for members to let us go out to consult, and in which it'll give opportunity for the trade, members of the public and everybody else to put any views forward as to whether or not they agree or disagree with anything, or if there are other aspects of the policy that they wish for us to look at and change.
Can you just clarify on point 3, page 58, yeah? Where it says 7 or 8 penalty point, the driver will be required to pass a practical technical test. Will those drivers affected will still be allowed to, during that, allowed to carry on driving taxi?
Yes, they will. So they will be required to pass the practical test.
Yeah.
They will be given 3 opportunities to do it. They do have to pay for it themselves. If they fail all 3 times, we would then look at reviewing their licence.
Right.
But as a standard, it will be if you've got 7 or 8 points, we will require you to go and pass the driving test. But they can continue working.
They can continue to
that.
work. Yeah.
The only time we stop somebody immediately, so the only time that there's an immediate stop to somebody to being able to work would be if a very serious offence occurred or a serious incident occurred that brought into question whether that person was safe to remain on the road. So are they a danger to the public?
Yeah.
If that's the case, that's when we, generally speaking, even when we revoke if we revoke a licence, it's not with immediate effect, and everybody will continue to work up until the appeal period is over or until the appeal has been heard.
Yeah, I'm happy, but driver should not be deprived of the income. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Watson?
Yeah, it's not specifically a question, but I do think it is important that we debate these kinds of things because this is a very important policy. And I have to say, having looked at the proposed amendments that have been made by the officers, there's a few typos which I'm happy to take offline. But I think that there's been some good work done here, and the proposed amendments actually they serve to reinforce the aims of the policy in terms of ensuring public safety and everything, and to make sure that our Kirklees drivers are regarded as some of the best in the country, as being very professional and so forth. The change to the number of points, I think that does address what I understand had been quite a contentious issue for the trade, in that there's a great deal of concern about the 7, 8 points point, so to speak. By increasing that to 9, I don't see that massively changes issues of public safety. As the officers said, by the time you get to that point, you've probably done a course. You're now getting to your 3rd or 4th conviction. Whether it's 3, 4, it doesn't fundamentally make a difference. But by raising that threshold, we really are drawing a line then and saying, if you want to be a professional driver in Kirklees, don't go above 9. Because you will be in deep trouble. So I'm quite happy to support this.
Anyone else? Any questions? Any comments? Mr. Rashid, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi. I have a question. I understand the logic behind the point system. What happens, right, after someone's got 9 points and they pass the test and everything, and they can carry on driving as a taxi driver? What happens if they get more points and they hit the 12 threshold, but they don't get banned? Then what?
If somebody gets further points, it would be a further officer review of the licence, and we would look at whether they're fit to hold the licence. I would likely say it would be likely that at that point they would be facing revocation. But again, every circumstance is different. I've seen cases, and you think to yourself, what's an exceptional circumstance? And sometimes one does happen, and you think, well, that's what an exceptional circumstance is. So without, I can't go into whether or not somebody would or wouldn't lose a licence, because it wouldn't be appropriate for me to do so. But when considering all the situations, we look at everything, so a decision will be taken. But I would say if somebody has hit 12 points, it is more than likely they would lose the licence. As is, if they hit 9 points and they don't pass the test first time, it's likely they would lose the licence.
Fair enough. And just another point, I don't know if you know the answer to this right today. Are there any drivers in Kirklees with more than 12 points on the road?
To my knowledge, I would say no. However, I haven't actually physically gone through every record to be able to confirm that as a certainty. I would hope there isn't, without us picking up on it. But again, if somebody does get 12 points, if they don't tell us and they've got a 3-year licence, because somebody can, and it has happened where somebody's got to the point where they've even been banned within the 3 years and not notified us of it. So it can happen, and without actually looking and checking everybody's DVLA licence, I think it'd be quite difficult for us to say.
Thank you for that. And just last point to the whole members, I would ask that this policy does go out for consultation so that the rest of the trade can have a look at it as well and make any comments. And we welcome that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It'd also be interesting to hear from the gentleman from North Kirklees who represents the trade over there. Oh, is he gone? Oh, I can't see behind you. Okay, all right, we can't hear from him then. The gentleman over there has his hand up. Can you identify who you are and who you represent, please?
It's Arfan Asif, GMB. My question is to Fiona. Basically, you've mentioned obviously the 7 points leading on to the 9 points, and you also mentioned that you don't have the records. I think, the driver's not notifying you. I think there seems to be a problem with the system rather than the points. I think the first question is the point system. I haven't yet to come across anybody that's got 7 points. It's usually the 3 points, 6 points and 9 points. So we've got an issue with the 7 points. And second, obviously, is notification. I think that needs to be addressed as well. We're putting the onus on the drivers. If they're not notifying you at 7 points, so technically they'll still be on the road if you're pushing this.
Thank you. So in relation to the first point, with regard to the 7 points, that's why we're doing the consultation, because we know there's been issues with the 7 points. It is rare for somebody to get 7 points, but it's not unheard of. If somebody chooses to appeal it or go to court, there is a possibility that a magistrate may award 4 points. So if they've got 3 points and then they get another 4 points, it can hit the 7 point threshold. I've known that happen. So it does happen where they hit 7 points. 7 points historically was just the threshold. It was the threshold of, once you hit that point, we're going to look at your licence. So yes, it's very likely a person is already at 9 points at that point. With regard to the notification of points, it is a condition of the licence. Every single driver that comes and renews, every time they renew the licence, signs a document to say they've read and understood their conditions. They are supposed to notify us within a time scale. They can do so in any way, such as they can phone us and tell us, they can email us, they can come in and tell us. And a lot of them do, but some of them don't. And, I don't know how, unless we are checking everybody's DVLA driving licence monthly, we would be able to see how many points that everybody's got on their licence all the time.
Yeah, I understand obviously what the conditions are. I'm also a licensed driver for Kirklees, but we're looking at the people that are making it difficult for everyone else. The dishonesty, I think that goes into it as well. So I'm not sure if Drive Tech is a system that checks the driver's details. I might be wrong, But I'm sure there's something out there that if the driver signs up for, they don't need to notify the council.
Thank you for that. That's not something I've actually heard of, so we will have a look at that. Because I mean, ultimately, it's similar to the DBS situation. We want everybody on the online update service so that they don't, you know, it automatically will notify us if there's changes. If there is something out there that tells, you know, that can notify the authority if somebody does get points, so they don't have to, then we can have a look into that. I've never personally heard of it.
I think one more thing, I'm aware that Kirklees issue a 3-year licence, so on a technicality, if a driver doesn't disclose it, isn't that a bit of a loophole for the drivers, the dishonest ones?
It is, and I'm not going to, you know, those that do, it does happen where we get to the point where they renew 3 years down the line and we see they've got multiple motoring offences and we see that they haven't notified us, and that's why we have this policy, because actually that will strengthen the reason why they are not fit and proper to hold a licence anymore. And those, you know, the considerations that we've highlighted in red on this document set out what we look at. So has that person been dishonest? If that person's been dishonest as well as receiving the points, that's a part of the picture as to whether or not they continue to be fit to hold a licence.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? Right, okay, let's move to the recommendations then. So there's 3 recommendations that have been put forward. The first one is to instruct officers to commence a 3-month consultation, considering the proposals in Appendix 1. The second option is to suggest any further amendments. Do the committee have any further amendments that they think should be included in Appendix 1, and then it going out to consultation for 3 months? Or do we agree not to implement any of the proposed changes or conduct a consultation and keep the policy exactly the way it is when it was adopted in 2019? Okay, so let's move to the first one. Instruct officers to commence a 3-month consultation in respect to the changes made in Appendix 1. Can I see a show of hands? I think it's unanimous. Lovely. No point going through the others. Thank you. So moving on to the last agenda item, which is item 10. Okay, so this is for members to consider and resolve a decision-making process relating to Hackney Carriage and private hire licence service. Fiona?
Thank you, Chair. So, as members will remember, hopefully, although it has been a few months, we brought to the last committee a report following a consultation on the Department for Transport statutory standards. And within that, there was a recommendation that we look at decision-making within the authority. Members, we did the consultation asking whether or not people thought that the current process of myself as a group leader should make the decisions, or whether it should go to elected members or a panel or something like that. The Department for Transport Standards recommends that the decision-making should be the responsibility of a panel of suitably trained elected members. However, it is just a recommendation, and you know, members can deviate from the standards as long as they detail reasons why they want to. So following the meeting of the Licensing Safety Committee on the Wednesday, the 6th of July, we've gone away and investigated some possible options in relation to the decision-making process, and we've come up with 3. One option is a members panel, so that would be a members panel where this is sat on by yourselves as the members of the Licensing and Safety Committee. We have an officer panel, which would comprise of just officers of the council, or alternatively, you could decide that decisions are to remain with myself as group leader, or anybody who fills the group leader post should I not be in post. We've done a bit of a table for you, and you can find that at Appendix 1. So Appendix 1 details what we think are the benefits and the risks of each of the options. So, for example, a members panel, The benefits are there will be a level of impartiality. It will address concerns raised as part of the consultation on the DFT standards. So we are aware that when we did consult, that a number of people came back saying that they thought members should be the decision makers. And it would comply with the DFT standards. The risks involved in this one would be there could potentially be delays in the decision making, in particular around existing licence holders. Ultimately, having to arrange for panels of members twice a month may be quite challenging. There will be an increased cost which would be borne by the licence holder or the applicant. So we would have to look at the fee of the applicants because there is an increased cost in the administration of the applications. There is the possibility of lobbying of members by licence holders and applicants. There will be increased resources required, so it would need to involve licensing, legal governance, and we'd need to ensure we can get adequate meeting rooms. And it would take us out of step of other West Yorkshire licensing authorities. There is a process that we've laid out, but I won't go through those at the moment. The second option would be an officer panel. So the benefits of that, again, it would be an impartial. It would give you impartiality, and it'll address some, but not all of the issues raised as a result of the consultation. So having more than one person make the decision will address a lot of the concerns. The risks to this, again, are delays in the decision making, particularly around the existing licence holders. The cost, again, would have to be borne by the licence holder or the applicant because of the administration costs of doing so. It wouldn't comply with the DFT standards, and again we would be out of step with other West Yorkshire authorities, and we would need to bring in licensing, legal, and again arrange meeting rooms for this to happen. And finally, members could decide to keep the decision making with the group leader of licensing, who's currently myself. The benefits of this are impartiality, decision made in a timely manner, or at least it would be less of a delay. There are occasions when decisions can take quite a while, even just with myself, especially if we're waiting for further information. There would be a reduction in the cost, so it wouldn't to the actual licence holders, because the resources are a lot less with it just being one person, and it would be in line with the other West Yorkshire authorities. The risks of it is a perception of impartiality, although I believe I'm impartial at making my decisions. The perception of it is that it may not be, and it doesn't address the concerns raised as a result of the consultation of the DFT results. So the next steps and timelines would be members are asked to make a decision about the decision-making responsibility today. I would like to remind you that it is recommended that the decision-making should be the responsibility of a panel of suitably trained counsellors. If members are minded to deviate from the guidance, that they're reminded that you'd need to provide reasons for the deviation. Following the decision by members, if it's decided decision making will be the responsibility of members, we are going to need to do a little bit more work to get some proper processes put in place. If it were to fall to a panel of officers, there won't be any requirement to change the consultation, but again, constitution, sorry, not consultation, the constitution, if it goes to members, we would need a formal change to the constitution to be able to do that. It's proposed that if members are minded to agree for decision making to be undertaken by a member or officer panel, that we would take effect from the 1st of April 2023 to allow us to put the processes and procedures in place ready for that start. If members were to decide that the responsibility of the decision making is to remain with myself as group leader, we would also, say that we will carry out a full review of the current process to ensure that the applicant is also provided with an opportunity to address the decision maker before the decision's made, which will align with the principles of natural justice. So currently at the moment, when we get decisions, the licence holder speaks to a licensing officer in an interview, and they're offered the opportunity to give their version of events, or they're offered to put forward why they think that they should remain licensed. We would look at it to say that actually they can come and address the decision maker at the time of the decision. So members are now asked to consider the following 3 options and take a decision on how they want the decision making to look going forward. And hopefully from the 1st of April 2023. I've noted a spelling mistake in that, because it said form instead of from, so apologies members. And the options are 1, a members panel, 2, an officer panel, or 3, remain with the group leader for licensing. But I would just need to emphasise that if you do wish to deviate from the DFT standards, that please could we have valid reasons for that, and we would like to recommend that members introduce an officer panel. It's a matter for you, Chair.
Councillor Sokal.
Yeah. Chair, I remember years back, we used to have a cross-party members panel, yeah? The panel who used to hear very serious cases or serious conviction taxi drivers used to have, yeah? Or private taxi drivers. The cross-party panel, members panel was, I think, abolished on the main issue of the cost, not any other. But since the members panel has been abolished and the authority given to the officer panel, yeah. Since that, I can't speak all elected members, but I can speak myself. Yeah. We get a lot of complaints from taxi drivers. What they say, the officers are not dealing with them fairly, or some member even reported to me or came to me saying the license authority officer got the culture that always anti-taxi drivers culture. Yeah. They don't think the taxi drivers work for the authority. They don't take into the, they don't want to improve relations. They don't think so. But that's the accusation I've been receiving. Yeah, even some minor issue. This issue is going on. New tax, what they call tax code check. If you know what they call tax code check. Yeah,
yes, the new tax code.
Yeah, I got a lot of complaint about that. Yeah. Driver, I think it started this March or April, yeah, this new system. When the driver renew their badge, they have to provide that tax code, tax check code, something like that. I keep forgetting, yeah. And with some of them, the tax code system did not work on the license authority system, and the driver have been asked to get a correct tax code from the inland revenue, yeah? But inland revenue, they take a long time because mistakes have been made on some tax code. They might have a different names or different date of birth. It's not made by those people, made by the, I think, the system in the inland revenue or there. So what happened, if the tax code is not working on their system, the drivers are suspended. Yeah? And until they get the correct tax code from inland revenue take a long time to think about. They're asking so many documents to correct the. I approached the officer myself as well. Can this driver be on temporary basis allowed to carry on their job until they provide their until they provide the correct tax code, yeah? But it's been refused that request. I'm not saying there are some other issues, yeah? Ben drivers got some conviction and others. I feel myself, I'm not speaking all other members here, I think we need to think about bring back the panel, cross-party members panel back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marchington?
I think my recollection of why we changed the system before is different from Councillor Sokol's, not for debate here. I think the things I want to ask and comment on is what's happening across the rest of West Yorkshire. Are the other authorities moving back to a members panel? Yeah.
I can address that one. So at the moment, no other licensing authorities within West Yorkshire are looking to go back to a members panel, to my knowledge. We do meet regularly, and as it stands, it still sits with officers in all of the other authorities within West Yorkshire.
Yeah. So, and I think the other question, and again thinking of in this other areas where we question the difference between member decisions and officer decisions, it's about the quality of decisions that are made. I was understanding when we discussed the changes before, there's always the option where licence holders are not happy about the decisions made, they can go to the magistrates court, and we felt quite strongly that was the appropriate thing to do. So one of the questions, you might not have this information at the moment, Fiona, but where people are not happy with the decisions that you as a lead member have made, what steps have been taken after that? And again, I don't think we are in a position to actually compare that with what the decision, that difference between members and whatever. I'd be happy to pick up the issues around natural justice and whether, make sure it's clear to licence holders what the mechanisms are. You might want to, think about that, and I'm happy to discuss that. But at the moment, it's about the quality of decisions, and I don't see any, people have legitimate complaints about the decisions they make, but the quality of decisions that have been made by the officer lead seems to be quite high. And at the moment, I'd be minded to keep it like that. I'd want us to be very careful about if we do move back towards a member panel or to move to an officer panel to look at the implications for that. And we do clearly need a discussion somewhere about people's recollections of why we moved from one to the other. Yeah.
Do you have any proposals, Councillor Marchington, based on what you've said? Is there a conclusion that you can come to?
Well, at the moment, I'm minded to keep the decision with the lead officer, and the rationale for that is that my perception is the quality of decision that's been made are still of a high quality. They are meeting our, with confidence what we would want as the licensing and safety committee. So I don't have particular concerns about this. I think the quality, it's maintaining our duties to make sure that things have been done properly.
Councillor Homewood.
Thank you, Chair. So I mean, agree with what someone said there. I'm not sure that what the evidence is to say that the decisions we're making now are not the right decisions, and so we should move to a different system. But I understand the guidance that we've had. The thing I just wanted to raise was, why do we need to have a members panel or an officer panel? I'm just thinking that, we have a chair of licensing. Would it not be sensible to have an officer panel that includes the chair of licensing if it was a panel? So you had, say 2 officers and the chair or another member. I'm just trying to understand why it has to be all members or all officers, because there's an element, isn't there, here around, from an officer perspective, that we've got a lot of knowledge and experience that no member can have as much experience as somebody who does that as their day-to-day job. But then there's a question mark around, and democratic accountability, or should. So I'm not suggesting there's necessarily any reason to change, but I just wonder why we're not considering that as an option. Because it happens in other decision-making scenarios that we have in the council.
Ultimately, it is a matter for members to make the decision. If that's the way they were minded to go, then that's what we would look to implement. I'm not sure whether we would need the change to the constitution if the chair was involved, because obviously it is currently under the constitution, it's delegated down to officer level only, so any changes to involve members may require some change to the constitution. But again, it is a matter of, you know, we've sat down as officers and thought that we tried to make the process as easy and simple and straightforward as possible, and keeping it at the 3 streams, so member panel, officer panel, and or keep with the delegated officer as is. If members are minded to introduce a different alternative, we can look at that going forward.
I just think, sorry, just to follow, I'm just the reason why I'm a bit confused, because if I'm reading this correctly, what we're saying is, at the moment we have the group leader doing that. We're saying the guidance tells us not to do that. So the proposal is to have an officer panel, which doesn't really deal with what the guidance is saying either, other than it says it's more people, so there's less sort of one-person error, if you see what I mean. But
yeah. So the DFT guidance, it is statutory guidance, and we consulted on all of the guidance, decision-making being one of them. Now, it says we have to be mindful of the guidance, but there is no reason why an authority cannot deviate from what is the statutory guidance as long as they have a reason for doing so. As a couple of the members have alluded, the reasons why that it was taken away from members in the, or decision was taken for members to no longer make the decision was for a number of reasons, you know, and one being was potentially the decision making that was happening was maybe not as effective as the decision making by officers. But again, it's a matter for members to decide. So if members wish to deviate from the proposals that we've come up with, it is for you to advise us.
Councillor Holman, could you just elaborate a little bit for the note taker about if you are interested in deviating from the guidance, is there a specific reason why you made that recommendation?
I suppose what I'm saying is I'm a bit uncomfortable with just having a members panel for the reasons that you've just set out, and I think we've made those decisions to change from that for a particular reason. And from what I understand, I mean, I don't have all the information, but I don't think. My recollection was we had a number of cases where there was a lot of issues with those that were highlighted. I'm not sure that's the same thing that's happening currently. So that suggests that, as you've suggested, maybe the decision making since that point has been okay. But what I'm suggesting is if the guidance is that we should be looking to include elected members in some way, perhaps as a bit more of a hybrid solution, that we could include a member in that decision, but with the officers. I don't know whether that's appropriate or not, but I'm just throwing it out there as an option to consider. I'm not suggesting we suddenly do that today because we've not really given any consideration to it previously, but it just seemed to me that something that we could do. And I just think, I kind of thinking around how we make decisions around like, I'm thinking in standards decisions in the council. I know it's a different thing, but we have an officer, a member and an independent person, for example. So there are potentially other ways that maybe we could get a better breadth of understanding and have some sort of, because I think it is right that you have some challenge, don't you, to yourself making a decision, that you have someone to have an alternate view, but we don't want to just put it back to a situation where maybe members are just being kind of relentlessly lobbied, essentially, to make decisions. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the problem, isn't it? And I think that can be where the problems were arising before.
Thank you. Yeah, I take on board what you're saying. I would like to emphasise that there are occasions where I get cases and I think to myself, oh, I'm not sure, or, I don't know which. And in those instances, I usually do consult with either Russell as operational manager, who's my manager, or Martin, or both, and we come to a consensus already. So we do utilise that already. I think Martin had a comment on that as well, if that's okay, Chair.
The only thing I was going to come back to Councillor Homewood on is, during the consultation of the DFT standards, we're asked to consider decision-making, and the recommendation is through members' panels. And given the decision of the authority previously that a members' panel wasn't the right way for Kirklees and other West Yorkshire authorities have got the same consensus, There was also criticism of the existing system where it was delegated to a single officer. So really we're asked to come up with a third way, and the officer panel is the third way that we came up with, and we just didn't consider an alternative which could include officers and members. So it wasn't that we considered that and discounted it. It's an interesting suggestion that you've come up with. But the officer panel is just an alternative to status quo and something that we'd already considered not to be right for Kirklees. So we've got an option. That was the main reason that the the officer panel was considered. If that's any help.
Councillor Davis?
Just a question for me, just to help me put my own decision-making at peace here, is if we don't follow the DFT guidance, and you've said it's statutory guidance, what are the consequences?
It is statutory guidance, but it does say that if councils wish to deviate from it, if they as long as they have reasons for doing so, then that's absolutely fine. It's just that, you know, we've got to show that we've given the guidance consideration.
Councillor Watson?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it is, this is almost a question of saying be careful what you wish for. And I think it's dangerous to consider where we are now in isolation and almost in a vacuum without looking at the history of the matter. Councillor Marchington pulls his punches. I'm not going to do that. When I joined the council in 2016, we had a member panel that dealt with it, and I sat on that panel. And that panel sat in a quasi-judicial capacity to interpret the policies that had been set out and to pass judgment on those who appeared before it. And I remember that the first case that we dealt with, I think it was drugs. There was two. I think it was the first one was drugs. There was a chap before us who had a conviction for drugs, who was wanting to carry on driving a taxi in Kirklees. And my view was that this was pretty much an open and shut case. And the panel considered it, and the outcome of the vote at the end was that he kept his taxi driver licence, which I found a little surprising. And then we moved on to the second one. And the second one was a conviction for violence. And I thought, well, this is simple, isn't it? You're not going to have taxi drivers in Kirklees with a conviction for violence. But guess what the outcome was? Kept the licence. And that was all dealt with in private. So it wasn't a public hearing, so we couldn't mention that. So at the next council meeting, the next full council meeting, I asked the chair of the committee to confirm that following the outcome of that member hearing, there was indeed taxi drivers licensed in Kirklees who were driving with convictions for drugs and violence. And of course he couldn't lie, so he had to confirm to the whole council that that was indeed the case, that Kirklees approved people driving taxis with those kind of convictions. And that caused an uproar. That caused an uproar in the press. And there was a great deal of condemnation at that point in time of the policy that Kirklees had. And the reality was that at that time, if my recollection serves me correctly, that actually the West Yorkshire councils had moved away from member panels, but we were the only ones that retained a member panel, along with Rossendale and Rochdale. And a comment was made to me at the time that when you deal with your taxi licensing, you do not want to be in the same basket as Rochdale or Rossendale, for reasons that I'm sure we all understand. So as a consequence of that situation, the matter came before the council, and the council took the decision to take the decision-making away from a member panel. And since then, it has rested with the system that we've got at the moment, and that system seems to have worked very effectively for the past 8 years. We talk about quality of decision-making, and I think that the briefing that we had earlier in the year, which was confidential, but took us through many of the decisions that had been made, showed that the officers were actually getting it spot on. There were some very good decisions made then, and if you remember, I very strongly advocated, and I've made the point today again, I very strongly advocated for making some of that information public because it really was a good news story about how the system that we had implemented and the guidelines that we'd implemented and the structure for judicial decision-making that we'd implemented was working very well. So that's where we are now. Just to pick up on a couple of other points, at the moment we sit effectively as the legislature. We as a committee, we set the law, we set the rules, okay? I don't think it's proper for the legislator to then sit in judgment. It doesn't, it's a constitutional fundamental. Look at the way the country operates. We have a legislature that sits in Parliament. They don't then pass judgment on individuals who are brought before the courts. but we have an independent judiciary. And that is the system that we at Kirklees have implemented. And as I say, in my view, it works very well. We have in this room the legislature that sets the policy, and we've spent quite a bit of time discussing the policy today. And then we have a system whereby the decision-making on that policy, the judiciary, is effectively the officers. So I wouldn't want to change that, because ultimately, the officers give us a very good service in terms of decision-making, I believe. But any individual who comes before the officer in relation to this kind of matter, who thinks that the officers have got it wrong, have the ability to go before the magistrates. And there is that ultimate backstop, and therefore, I don't think it's broken, and I think we should be very, very careful about tinkering with it. And then I would therefore support just maintaining the status quo.
Councillor Sokal.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I listen to Councillor Watson. Yeah, there might be some wrong decision taken by members' panel in the past. It might be not. It's his judgment. Yeah, but I think decision might have been made wrong since we set up a officers panel, because getting a lot of complaints from taxi driver. I can't disclose here. Yeah, but both it's not perfect. Yeah, I think it's a good idea, good proposal from Councillor Homeboard. Yeah, there should be some kind of involvement, member involvement with the officer panel. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, officer panel. I think it's a good proposal. From what I'm proposing, I think, because members have spoken on different system, should be some different system on receiving to consider these complaints or whatever. Yeah, I think it would be better if we defer this item today and come back with some alternative option. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Zaman.
Thank you. I think the suggestion that the current decision-making is in line with how the country operates as a whole is quite frankly preposterous. The fact of the matter is that currently this decision-making lies essentially with one officer or a group of officers. So I do think that there needs to be some level of change. One thing that I would like to propose is that if we were to keep the initial decision-making with the officers, perhaps before going to appeals at the magistrates, maybe if an appeal be heard before the members, where we can obviously decide the merits of the case, and then from then on the appeals procedure can be set into action, or maybe that we completely take the decision making out the hands of the officers and bring it either to the members or a combination of a panel of members and officers that come to a decision collectively.
Can you comment on that? So there's another recommendation there.
Yeah.
That there's a further process, an additional process.
Yeah, I think when a decision's taken, so when I make my decisions and the decision letter's issued, that's when the appeal process starts. So they would have 21 days to appeal from the date of the decision. How it would work if we were to make a decision and then it have to come, because obviously it's set in law, is the appeal time frame. So once that person's received their decision, I don't know how we would then go and put something else in place in between. I don't know whether that'd be possible. David, do you?
I think, well, my only comment would be that at any time during the appeal process, the appeal could be withdrawn. So potentially, if you're worried about your 21 days, you make a decision, that could be appealed, and then the court will list it for a hearing these days, probably at some point in 4 or 5 months' time. Within that time, if there's another process that resolves the issue, be that some kind of appeal process involving either officers or members, then that driver, if your decision changes, can withdraw the appeal.
But again, Chair, that decision would be a matter for the committee. So it's not really for officers to comment.
Sure, I just wanted to know how practical it might be. Councillor Zaman?
Just on a practical perspective, one suggestion might be that if, say, we were to go along something like that, perhaps the initial decision from the officers maybe could be a recommendation for either or, and then maybe the I think you did well that you phone didn't ring for 2 hours. But as I was saying, something along the lines of if an officer provides a recommendation that the driver can then, refer to committee, that might be a way around the appeals process. But it's just an alternative that might reduce the workload on members, as well as leaving some power in the hands of officers as well.
Thank you. Councillor Marchington?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't pulling my punches, I was just being polite. My reflection is quite clear. There's at least one case that we looked at, and as a group business manager, where clearly decisions were made by a member panel that was inappropriate. I am being polite there, and I don't think it's right to say. So, and that's why we moved to the system we've got. It's really good to have a debate, an appropriate debate at this stage about it. I thank Councillor Homewood for his suggestion. So there might be an opportunity for us to look at member involvement in it in an appropriate way. But I think we need to look at that in some detail and discuss that, not necessarily, and to do that. And I wouldn't want that to do that today. So in the meantime, I'm still fairly confident that the procedure we've got at the moment is working, and we might want to move something different. I would really want that to happen in step with our colleagues across West Yorkshire as well. So we're not getting ourselves out of step with neighbouring authorities. And again, that was one of the issues previously, which was quite significant. And we're now, primary duty is to maintain the safety of, for that's wrong. I would also like to say, and I probably should have, is that actually the information we had earlier in the year is actually, what it shows, demonstrates is that, the vast majority of, and it's, it's like, 95% of our licence holders, both Hackney carriage holders and private hire holders, drive, in an exemplary way. And my personal experience, and I'm a cyclist. I've cycled 1,500 miles in the last 12 months, and you get up close and personal to vehicles. And I've been mindful of our taxi and how they are, invariably polite and professional. And I think it's not just for the sake of public; it's also for the that very small minority, the handful of people who do not. It's for all of our benefits, including the licence trade, to make sure that that's dealt with in the best way that we can do. And people do complain about decisions that are made, and there should be a process to make sure there's legal processes appropriately. But all of us should want this to, those people who should not be holding licences for whatever reason, we need to be confident that they're dealt. It's not just it's the trade as well, that they're dealt with appropriately. In the best way. So I'm mindful to keep the position we've got at the moment, but also in the light of what Councillor Homewood said, to explore ways that members could be effectively included in the decision-making process without going back to the things that were clearly a problem in the past. And I think at some stage it might be good to share with newer members of the panel about what those were and why we don't want to go back to find ourselves in the decision we were 8 years ago.
Councillor Lawson?
Can I just ask how many of the decisions have actually gone to appeal that have been made by officers? Because I look at it this way, that you can have, you've obviously got officers that will have received training in looking at various things, may even have sort of legal knowledge open to the legal department here. And I am mindful that you've then got a body of lay people like myself. My background is a nursing background. I think I can look at something and go, oh yes, but I would want to get it correct. So if we were going to have a members-led panel, what training would be provided for us before we actually started making decisions on people's livelihoods?
Good question.
Well, if that's the case, we would have to look at, obviously the guidance says it has to be suitably trained. The officers that are doing it, the members that are doing it have to be suitably trained. Historically, it has been quite challenging to arrange training for members. I'll be honest, not all members are available, and we'd need to have that. You know, members would need to give that assertion that they would be willing to do the training to be able to sit on it. Obviously, we would need to ensure that enough members were trained to the standard so that we had enough to sit on any panel. But again, it's a matter for members to make the decision if that's the way they want to go. But we would have to look at what training and how extensive it would need to be. Like similarly this year, as the member training for you to sit on the committee in itself, you know, we've employed a barrister to come and deliver that training. So again, there's cost implications for that. So any training that is taking place, there are cost implications for it, and it's about members as well, actually being able to give their time to it. So you know, I'd suggest members need to be mindful of that. So that's hopefully answered that question.
Yeah, I think Councillor Lawson asked a question about how successful your decisions have been made in terms of the magistrates when it's gone to appeal.
Since I've been in post, which was February 2020, we haven't lost an appeal to date. We do have one that's currently, we didn't lose, we won it, and they are appealing the decision at Crown. So we will see where that one goes. But so far, I've not had a decision against a decision from the magistrates go against any of the decisions I've made.
Sorry, can I just come in? I actually manage the team that deals with the appeals that go to the Magistrates' Court, and you generally have two kinds of cases. The first one, obviously, drivers can, if you're being cynical, put in an appeal to prevent their licences being removed. So if they put in an appeal, the status quo is maintained, so they have a licence until such time as the appeal is determined. So potentially with court dates and court waiting times, it's actually economically viable for a driver to say, oh, I'm just going to put in an appeal because it means I can carry on driving for however long it takes for the appeal to get through to court. In terms of success rates, I'm aware in my 5 years of Kirklees of one case that we lost, and that was at the appeal court, or the Crown Court, which is the appeal court from the Magistrates' Court. The Magistrates' Court agreed with the decision that was made by officers. But the driver chose to appeal to the Crown Court in Leeds, which was his right and prerogative, and the court made a decision that he was a fit and proper person. But so far, I think in terms of I think what you're trying to get at is, do we have confidence in officer decisions, i.e. they're not being overturned willy-nilly, so you can be confident that when they go to the magistrates, all the decisions aren't turning out to have been the wrong decisions. And I think the answer to that is probably yes.
Councillor Lawson. Councillor Watson.
No. Broken, so we should be very careful about fixing it.
Councillor Davis.
I was going to ask exactly the same question about the measure of the strength of our decision making, and one overturn in 5 years. That's strong to me.
Councillor Homewood.
I was just going to agree really with what Councillor Marchington said. I think for me, having listened to this discussion, I think it'd be premature to change the process that we've got at the moment. And I think I listened to what Councillor Watson said and made a very strong argument about the reason why we've got the decision making we have at the moment. And to me, that type of position gives what you were what the officer was talking about in terms of needing to have a clear reason that we're diverging from the guidance. And I just feel a bit what we've got here probably isn't strong enough. It's a bit wishy-washy, isn't it? Well, you get this benefit, you get that benefit. Feels to me we probably need to go away and have a really clear argument of why we have that current policy, and or the other options that we've discussed, and there's been a few different ideas. But for me at the moment, it feels like we should keep what we've got and come back with a bit more kind of detail on why we've got that policy, and if we're going to keep that, have a really clear argument. And if we're not, and if we feel like we need to move more towards the guidance, then to have those other options in a bit more fleshed out a little bit more, I think, and what the benefits of those would be. That would be my thoughts, Chair.
Any more questions? Sorry, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I have missed most of the debate. I had to nip out and get my COVID jab. What I would say is, I would prefer certainly to keep the existing system. I don't think it was cost that we went across to the existing system, but I certainly think anything else that is proposed here would be more costly than we have at the moment. But I think more importantly, anything that we've got at the moment, there wouldn't be the consistency of decision making, and it would be far more. It would a far longer process for the driver waiting to get their badge. I think the quickest and the most efficient way of dealing with, I don't know, 95, 99% even of applications for badges is best dealt with certainly under the current process, and if needs be under an officer process. But to be honest, I'm not sure there's much, in reality, I'm not sure there's much difference. I do think members, however well trained, are not going to have the consistency of decision making as the officers would. And I do have faith in them. Thank you.
Councillor Zaman.
Hi. I'd just like something clarified, please. So, when an appeal is heard at the magistrates, is it that the entire case is heard again and a decision is made, or is it that an assessment is carried out on whether the officer interpreted the policy and law correctly?
It's a bit of both, really. Technically, it's a rehearing. So what the magistrates aren't doing is they're not scrutinising the decision-making and saying whether the decision was right or wrong. They're simply looking at the evidence and making their own decision. And if that's in line with the officer's decision, or in the case of a public house licensing application in line with the decision of the members on a panel, if it's been made as a panel decision, then that's all very well. If their decision is different, then they have to go through a hoop or two to overturn the decision made by the council. But yes, technically it's a rehearing, but fresh evidence can be introduced. That's one of the dangers, potentially, is if we make a decision on day one, and or rather the council or the committee make a decision on day one, and it takes 9 months to get to the magistrates, particularly with licences of premises. They've got 9 months to persuade the police, for example, that they're operating perfectly well. And so we have lost a few for those reasons on the sort of public house licensing and premises licensing. But yes, so what would happen is the only difference really is, and I know this is something that Fiona's aware of, because it's been raised by the strategic director, is that the magistrates don't run a process that's the same as ours, because the driver is in a position to make representations before decisions made. So it's not an analogous process. We run a different process. Our decision at the moment is made on the papers and on an interview. Whereas if you go to magistrates, it's a full hearing, so both sides are able to make representations, are able to cross-examine. It's run more the way you'd expect a trial to be run effectively. So I know one of the things that the strategic director was talking about was whether or not, before a final decision is made, because it's the officers, at the moment it's the officers that will interview and the group leader that will make the decision. So the group leader hasn't spoken to the driver. They're basing their decision on the report that's been given to them by the officer. So I think one of the considerations certainly that the strategic director was playing around with was whether or not there's a role for that driver being able to make representations to the group leader before a decision's made. So that would bring us more into line. And I think that's what's alluded to in the report in terms of natural justice. It's actually giving somebody the right to respond to the allegations, if you like, before a final decision's made. So hopefully that clarifies.
Just say apologies for being on my mobile phone. I received a phone call from the chief exec, and you don't ignore a call from the chief exec. So I had to send her a message there telling her what I was doing. Councillor Patterson?
Yeah, just a point I wanted to add. The addition of the list of cases that the officers had dealt with that we had in a previous meeting was a new something we hadn't done before, and I think that was a really good. Well, it's a really good bit of information for us, but I think that's a good check and balance as well if people are worried about members not being involved in decisions that are made.
Councillor Gregg?
Thank you, Chair. When this issue came up at the last committee and when it was first raised, I was thinking, yes, allow members to make these decisions. It sounded to me to be quite a common sense thing to do. And then having heard the debate today, I've actually, come to the decision that absolutely agreeing with what Councillor Patterson has said, consistency of decision making, hearing what seems to have happened in the past, just sort of emphasises what responsibility we have as councillors to make the right decision. And when you're sitting in a panel as a member, you sometimes don't, because ultimately members don't have the same expert knowledge of licensing legislation that officers do. And given that, I am leaning now to very much supporting what we currently have, which seems to be working very well. We've seen evidence via video footage of drivers that have been through the system and had their licences revoked for some, although they would be very rare instances, and most drivers in Kirklees are absolutely fantastic. There's the odd one that have had to be taken off the road for transgressing, and we saw some footage which was interesting on that front, and it did emphasise what robust measures are in place in Kirklees. Just looking ahead, I think there is possible scope potentially for the council in future to maybe look at bringing in maybe the chair or a panel to maybe look at some sort of collaborative measure, just to give some sort of reassurance to the industry that decisions are being made not behind closed doors, and there's input from elected members as well. But at the moment, I think I'd be very much minded to propose keeping the second the motion, if it has already been proposed, that we keep the existing measures in place. Thank you.
Any more comments or questions? Mr. Rashid, any comments, any questions? We'd like to hear from you, please.
Thank you. I'll be clear on my position. I know the trade would like a committee panel, and they've always wanted that. I know we had one 8 years ago. I remember that. I think it should be a mixture of the cabinet members and officer panels, but having heard the arguments and everything, I'm not really sure in which direction they should go. However, what Councillor Watson said about the offences that were made by taxi drivers for violence, did you say, I think? I think currently, if that was the case today, they wouldn't be going into a panel, would they? Because the badge would be taken automatically due to the suitability policy. I think I would second that councillor over there. I'm sorry I'm pointing at you, I don't know your name. Yeah, I think he did say to defer the decision today. and come back on a different day with more information about the options available and how they would impact everyone involved. So that's what I'd like to say. That's it.
Councillor Lawson?
Sorry, can I just get clarification? At the moment, if a driver is up for investigation looked at by one of the officers, they're not allowed to represent themselves, actually give their side of the story to, or the situation to the officers.
I'll clarify that. So at the moment, anybody that's investigated for behaviours or anything, or if they've received a conviction or something, they will be interviewed by a licensing officer, 2 licensing officers actually. We record the interviews, they're not formally paced interviews, so they're not done in accordance with Police and Criminal Evidence Act because it's not an offence, but they are interviewed, so they're asked questions, and at the end of each interview they are given the opportunity to put forward their reasoning and anything that they wish for the decision maker to take into consideration. So they're asked questions, and then once the officer's got all the information, they've created reports which details what's happened, any evidence that they've got, what's happened in the interview. We have the discs there for if the decision maker, if it's myself, in my absence, it would go up to Russell. To listen to the interviews, and we would make a decision as to that. Generally speaking, my personal, at the moment, because I try to keep myself, I try to keep it impartial, I try to avoid actually discussing matters with the driver because I'm trying to keep the impartiality there. But as you say, if we go forward, maybe looking at having somewhere where they come and actually physically sit and are given an opportunity to also put their point across to the one decision maker. Again, it's an option for members to make the decision.
Councillor Sokal?
Yeah, Chair, I think we got a very good discussion on this one. Either we keep the officer panel on or we defer it further to come back to there's some more discussion on the combination of officer or members panel, something like that. I think we should give some option to officer to come back on this one.
Are you proposing that, Councillor Sokal?
But it's already proposed by Councillor Holmes.
So you're going to second that?
Yeah, I can second that. But nothing wrong. Nothing. We might keep it on officer panel. Or we might get some combination of 1 or 2 members on the panel, just as an observer, not a member of the officer panel. Just sit down there to watch how the decision has been made. But it's wrong to say somebody is members might be not fully aware of the legislation, not qualified. That's wrong. We are councillors. We should know everything. We are qualified. We are accountable to the public. I hate to hear from some member to say the member might be not qualified to do the job. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the vote then. So there's a 4th option that's been presented and put on the table, which is a hybrid model, which is where officers, there's an officer panel, but possibly the opportunity for the chair or other members of the panel to sit in and either take part in the decision making or at least observe the decision making. And the option is for officers really to go away and have a look at, if that's a possibility, how it would work, the logistics of everything. And that's been proposed and seconded. So can we vote on that, please? Give a show of hands. I think majority.
Sorry,
can you put your hands up again, please?
7 members.
7 members?
Yeah.
So, majority?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we can ask officers to go away and do that, please, and have a look at the 4th alternative for us.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Can I, before we do end, sorry, can I just do a quick clarification of something that was brought up earlier about the tax check codes? We can, if there have been a couple of occasions where tax check codes haven't worked when they've come to us with them, the law, the government have said, no matter what, if we don't get that tax check code, we cannot issue a licence. So we don't actually suspend anybody because it's done at renewal. So if their licence has expired in the time and there is an issue with the tax check code, we are not allowed to actually issue that licence, be it temporary or not. We're just not allowed to do it. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, just another clarification. There's a lot of people in Kirklees that hold a valid taxi licence, but actually they don't do taxis. They have it as a backup plan in case they lose their job, they face redundancy. What happens to them individuals when they come back to renewing their badge and they don't have a tax code?
Well, they still need to do it. There is an option when they do it that says not working or not using badge at the moment. So when they go to sign in, they have to fill. It's quite straightforward. But one of the options for them is to tick "I'm not currently working as a taxi driver." So at that point, they will still get the tax code, and we can put it in the system. But they still have to physically sign on to it and put that in. Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Soccer.
Yeah, Chair, I agree with the Fiona. This is a legislation government policy. They have to provide this one tax check code, yeah, to renew the badge. But the issue is, some member, they have been working for a long time on taxi, driving taxi. It never happened before, and they might have never checked the tax check code. Is it correct or incorrect? They only knew when they put that check cost on the system, it doesn't work. So taxi drivers were ignorant about either it was correct or incorrect. That's what happened. That's why I was asking. Yeah, I think what I should do now, our officer, they should send a letter or individual, or you got some officer, yeah, go on that rank in the St. George's Square, explain the driver fully, check your tax before the renewal, they will birth.
Could I make an alternative proposal? We have trade meetings, and those are the sorts of things that we would discuss in those trade meetings, and the trade representatives are there to disseminate information to the taxi trade.
Some taxi driver, honestly, who came to me, one came on day before yesterday, he picked me up from, I was garage and took my car there. He said, I need you sign now because I can't get my taxi badge renewal. Because some taxi driver, I don't mind what I'm saying. Some taxi drivers say, oh, we don't know, our taxi trade never let us know about that.
Let me answer that. I'll tell you what the issue is. This is the issue. We had a driver who applied for their renewal and to get a tax code. They have 3 months to apply, and this driver chose to leave it 1 month before his badge expires. He applied for his tax code, and he had issues getting the tax code, and he couldn't get it. So he's come to me to try and sort it out, which I did. I helped him out. I told him what it's going to be like. If he doesn't get the tax code, he can't drive after that cut-off period. So I'm helping him out. He's then gone on to this colleague of mine. He's not told him that I'm helping him out, and he's told him the same sub-story. Then he's gone to a third person and done the same thing, right, while I'm actually helping him out. And then eventually when he did get his badge back, right, because of some running around and trying to sort it out with inland revenue and everything, and with licensing, which they were very helpful, I have to add. He got his badge back and everything. He thanked me, but then when my colleague asked him, how did you get your badge back? He goes, oh, I did it all myself. I didn't need any help.
It took all the credit.
You're going to take it with a pinch of salt, right? Because they will say one thing, but they do get the help. They'll come, whether it's with badge renewals, whether it's with the tax code, they do get the help. But I think a lot of them are unscrupulous with the information they give out.
I'm going to let Mr. Councillor Marchant come in. I'm going to end the meeting.
Thank you. Just to let you know, it's not just taxi drivers is an issue about being self-employed, and HMRC, I've been much tighter on it. I found that when I wanted to return to teaching, and it was, you know, in fact, I had to go through an agency rather than employ myself. So it's a HMRC issue. I think the issue for us as a committee is, you know, it'd be good for our officers to be able to help people in that situation. I'm not sure there's much we can do, you know, at this day. You know, there's better ways chance to do it rather than linking it to something around around something else. So, I mean, and appreciate the work you've done to help your colleagues about it. That's the right way to do. So it's an advice thing rather than a decision-making thing.
Thank you.
For us, you know.
I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.